So it's official. Harvey Weinstein, the man whose name launched the entire Me Too movement, just hired the legal team that got Diddy acquitted of sex trafficking and racketeering. Let that sink in for a second. The lawyers who walked into a federal courtroom in 2025 and convinced a jury that Sean Combs was guilty of prostitution charges but not guilty of trafficking and racketeering. Those same lawyers are now sitting at Harvey Weinstein's defense table as he prepares for his third rape trial in New York. Their names are Mark Agnifilo, Tini Geragos, and Jacob Kaplan. They're partners at a Manhattan boutique firm called Agnifilo Intrater. And they don't just defend celebrities. They defend the specific kind of celebrity that everyone else in the legal world is afraid to touch. Diddy, Weinstein, the NXIVM sex cult leader Keith Raniere, Luigi Mangione, Martin Shkreli. This isn't a law firm. This is the last line of defense for the most hated people in America. And honestly, the fact that one phone call can move a legal team from one accused predator to another tells you everything you need to know about how justice actually works for the powerful. Where Weinstein stands. Alright, so let's get caught up on Weinstein because his legal situation in 2026 is genuinely bizarre. He's fighting a war on two fronts. Front 1, California. He was convicted in Los Angeles in December 2022. 3 counts of rape and sexual assault, 16-year sentence. That conviction stands. He's serving it right now. Even if he beats every charge in New York, he's still doing time in California. Front 2, New York. This is where it gets complicated. His original 2020 New York conviction, 23 years for criminal sex act and rape, was overturned in April 2024 by the New York Court of Appeals. They ruled that the trial had been contaminated by prejudicial testimony from women who weren't part of the charges. So they retried him in 2025. Mixed verdict. He was convicted on 1 count involving Miriam Haley, which carries up to 25 years. He was acquitted on another. But the jury hung on the 3rd count, a rape charge involving Jessica Mann. That's the one that's going to trial again in April 2026. And that's the trial these new lawyers were hired for. Meanwhile, Weinstein is sitting in Rikers Island. He described it in a jailhouse interview as a slow march toward death. His defense team says he has leukemia, heart problems, diabetes, bone cancer, and sleep apnea. He's in a wheelchair every time the cameras are on. And his team has been lobbying to move him to a hospital instead of a jail. In January 2026, reports said he was considering a guilty plea. He turned it down. And in February, he hired Diddy's lawyers instead. That's not the move of a man who's given up. That's the move of a man who believes he can win. What they did for Diddy. In September 2024, Sean Combs was indicted on 3 federal charges: racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, and transportation to engage in prostitution. The prosecution's case was built around years of alleged coercion, violence, and what they called freak-offs, elaborate sexual events where participants were allegedly drugged and controlled. The maximum sentence if convicted on all counts? Life in prison. Mark Agnifilo and Tini Geragos walked into that courtroom and ran a defense they called toxic but consensual. Their argument was simple. Yes, Combs's relationships were dysfunctional. Yes, they were sometimes physical. But they weren't a criminal enterprise. They weren't trafficking. They were messy human behavior between consenting adults. They famously described Combs's relationship with Cassie Ventura as a great modern love story. And while that phrase made a lot of people's skin crawl, it worked. Because in July 2025, the jury came back with a verdict that stunned the legal world. Not guilty on racketeering, not guilty on sex trafficking, guilty only on 2 counts of transportation for prostitution. Instead of life in prison, Combs was sentenced to 50 months, just over 4 years. Projected release, April 2028. For a defense team, that's not just a win. That's a masterclass. They took a case where the government was asking for life and turned it into a sentence shorter than some drug possession convictions. And now, Harvey Weinstein is betting that they can do the same thing for him. Who are these lawyers? So let's talk about who Weinstein just handed his defense to, because these aren't ambulance chasers. These are some of the most sophisticated criminal defense attorneys in the country. Mark Agnifilo, founding partner of the firm, former federal prosecutor, spent nearly 2 decades at Brafman and Associates under Ben Brafman. the lawyer who originally represented both Weinstein and Combs before either case went to trial. Agnifilo has defended the leader of the NXYVM sex cult, Martin Shkreli, and a Goldman Sachs executive in the 1MDB scandal. Forbes named him one of America's top lawyers. He's known for obsessive preparation and a philosophy of fighting cases in the court of public opinion as aggressively as in the courtroom. Tini Geragos, daughter of Mark Geragos, the celebrity attorney who defended Michael Jackson and Chris Brown. She studied art history at NYU before going to law school, and she brings a media savviness that most defense lawyers don't have. She uses TikTok, she does television interviews. She understands that in 2026, a trial isn't just one in front of 12 jurors. It's one in front of 12 million people watching on their phones. And Jacob Kaplan, the quiet one, the procedural specialist. He was actually on Weinstein's original defense team back in 2018. He knows this case inside and out. He also worked with Agnifilo on the Luigi Mangione defense, the United Healthcare CEO murder case, where they successfully argued against terrorism enhancement charges by reframing the killing as politically motivated rather than random. That's the skill set Weinstein just bought: a trial strategist, a media manipulator, and a procedural surgeon. And together, their track record says one thing very clearly: they don't get their clients off, they get the charges down. The revolving door. Here's what this hire really reveals. It's not about one case or one client. It's about a system. There is a small circle of defense attorneys in this country who specialize in one very specific thing: defending powerful men accused of sexual misconduct. And that circle is shockingly small. Ben Brafman represented both Weinstein and Combs before the trials. Jose Baez, the lawyer who got Casey Anthony acquitted, represented Weinstein in between. Blair Burke, who calls herself a feminist, has defended Weinstein, Johnny Depp, and Mel Gibson. Mark Geragos, Tini's father, defended Michael Jackson and Chris Brown. Alan Dershowitz represented O.J. Simpson, Jeffrey Epstein, and Donald Trump. And now, Mark Agnifilo has gone from the NXIVM sex cult to Sean Combs, to Harvey Weinstein, to Luigi Mangione. In the span of 5 years, one lawyer has defended 4 of the most high-profile defendants in America, and each case taught him something he carried into the next one. The NXIVM trial taught him how prosecutors build RICO cases. He used that knowledge to dismantle the racketeering charge against Combs. The Combs trial taught him how to run a toxic but consensual defense in a sex crimes case. And now he's bringing that playbook to Weinstein. This isn't a conspiracy, it's a business model. These lawyers don't just specialize in a type of crime, they specialize in a type of client, the high-profile individual whose case is as much about cultural perception as it is about statutory law. And every case they win adds to a database of strategies that makes the next case easier to fight. The victims are different every time, but the defense team stays the same. The PR machine. And here's the part that separates a celebrity defense from a normal one. These teams don't just litigate, they narrate. Judah Engelmeyer is the PR spokesman for both Harvey Weinstein and Sean Combs. The same person. He's the one who called the lawyer swap a recalibrated outlook. And his job isn't just to talk to reporters. His job is to control the story before it reaches the jury pool. Crisis PR firms in Hollywood charge between $300 and $850 an hour to manage the public image of accused predators. They suppress negative search results. They prepare clients for the visual demands of a trial. What to wear, how to sit, how sick to look. In the Combs trial, the defense team made a point of emphasizing his free man appearance so the jury wouldn't see him as a prisoner. That's not an accident. That's a line item on an invoice. And Tini Geragos takes it a step further. She's on TikTok, she does television interviews, she humanizes her clients in a medium that the prosecution can't control. Because in 2026, the courtroom isn't the only arena. The algorithm is a courtroom too, and these lawyers know how to work it. The pattern. And when you look at the pattern, it's undeniable. Agnifilo defended Keith Raniere in the NXYVM sex cult case. Raniere was convicted. But the procedural lessons Agnifilo learned about RICO statutes became the blueprint for dismantling the racketeering charges against Combs. The Combs acquittal on trafficking became the proof of concept for the toxic but consensual framework. And now that framework is being imported directly into Weinstein's defense. Meanwhile, On the Mangione case, the same team successfully argued against terrorism enhancement charges by reframing the nature of the crime. That ability to downgrade the moral and legal weight of an act, to make something that feels monstrous sound like something that's merely complicated, is exactly what Weinstein is paying for. Each case feeds the next, each win becomes a strategy, and each client benefits from the lessons learned defending the last one. And here's what sits with me. Over 80 women came forward against Harvey Weinstein. Their stories launched a global movement. They testified in courtrooms. They faced cross-examination. They relived the worst moments of their lives in front of cameras and strangers, and some of them have been doing that for nearly a decade. And on the other side of that courtroom, there's a man in a wheelchair who just hired his 4th legal team. A man who rejected a plea deal. A man whose spokesperson called the move a recalibrated outlook. Because for Harvey Weinstein, this isn't about truth. It's about strategy. It's not about accountability. It's about finding the procedural loophole that turns a life sentence into a lesser charge. That's what the Hollywood legal elite sells. Not innocence, not justice. Just enough defense to keep the powerful from falling all the way down. We live in a system where everyone is entitled to a lawyer. And that's right. That's how it should be. But when the same small circle of attorneys cycles from one accused predator to the next, carrying the playbook, refining the strategy, perfecting the narrative, we're not looking at defense anymore. We're looking at an industry built on making sure the people with the most money are the last ones held accountable. Harvey Weinstein isn't just hiring a new lawyer. He's buying a blueprint for a partial victory. And that blueprint was built on the backs of every survivor who thought the courtroom would finally be the place where the truth mattered more than the price tag.